Welcome back, everyone, to the afternoon session of the Chad Daybell Doomsday Cult Murder Trial on Disorder in the Court. But while they are still out at lunch, we are going in live on the treadmill murder trial, and a detective is reading text messages between the defendant and others on the stand.
Out of chronological order.
They were out of order.
But are the times that you indicated for all of those text messages accurate?
They are.
We'll watch this until Daybell comes back.
The text messages contained in the defendant's phone.
That's correct. It's not the entire conversation between both parties.
And I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as S-155 and S-166. Could you take a look at those for me and tell me if you recognize them?
Please remember to thumbs up.
Could you briefly tell me how you recognize those?
They are sent text messages from Mr. Greger's iPhone.
And have you looked at them before?
I have.
And are they accurate depictions of what you observed in the defendant's cell phone extraction?
They are.
Your Honor, permission to move S-155 and 156 into evidence and have the witness read them to the jury.
No objection. S-155 and 166 in evidence.
56? Sure.
156?
156, I think I misspoke, Your Honor. 155 and 156.
No, it said 166 twice. So it's 150, 155 and
There are lots of
156.
evidentiary issues in this trial I've seen.
The first text message is an outgoing text message to the contact Laura with the number 151. The message was sent on April 4th, 2021 at 9:38:05 a.m. The body of the message states, "On my way," with an exclamation mark at the end.
And that was S-155.
That was S-155.
Okay. Could you please describe S-156?
Sure. S-156 is another outgoing text message to the contact Laura we just mentioned. This message was sent on April 4th, 2021 at 11:17:14 a.m. The body of the message states, "I'm here." Here is spelled H-E-R-E-E-E.
Thank you, Rachel. Good job.
The numbers.
We're just watching this until Daybell
156 is in
comes
evidence,
back.
166 has not been used yet.
Correct.
But I can't believe what this man did to his son, allegedly. Running him on a treadmill until he essentially died of his abuse. Is it just me, or does it seem that the world is getting worse for children, not better? Does it seem, or is it just that we know more now because of social media?
Yeah.
I'm extremely perplexed by this.
So when you review
Probably a combination of both.
text messages in the defendant's iPhone 11, do they go
Right,
back
Casey?
prior to April of 2021?
They do.
Do they go back to the beginning of the year?
They go back well beyond the beginning of the year.
What's that?
They go well beyond the beginning of the year. Well before, I guess is a better word.
And did you look through the defendant's contacts?
I did.
Did you see a contact labeled mom?
I did.
Okay. What is the phone number associated with mom?
Sure.
Can we just do the last four digits, maybe?
Yes,
Is that acceptable, both sides?
Yes, Judge.
Thank you.
8296.
Are there any text messages with mom in the defendant's phone?
Not before April 1st,
Of what year?
2021.
Okay. Which date is that?
I believe the messages were on either April 3rd or April 4th of 2021.
There's nothing prior to that.
There's not.
Okay. And is there a contact named Dad in the defendant's phone?
There is.
And could you tell us the last four digits of that phone number, please?
I think things are more visible.
Off of this, I can't recall the four numbers, but I cannot recall Dad's phone number.
Okay. Do you remember seeing the name Dad in the contacts?
I did.
Okay. And were there any text messages with the contact Dad in the defendant's phone?
There were.
What's that?
There were.
When's the first one?
And I believe it was on April 3rd of 2021.
So there were none prior to that.
Let's
That you
phrase it like this.
recall.
There were no messages prior as an individual conversation. There were some group chats that took place well before March of 2021.
Now, after reviewing the text log, were you able to review searches performed on the defendant's iPhone 11?
I was.
And were you able to isolate certain searches?
I was.
I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as S122. Could you take a look at S122?
Yes,
Do you recognize S122?
I do.
What is that?
They're identified as either searched items or web history from Mr. Greger's iPhone's Safari web browser.
And is that all of the search history from the defendant's iPhone 11 or excerpts from the defendant's search history?
It's an excerpt of the searches from the date and time, or the time range.
How did those items get into S122 like that?
Like this. In this case, we did what's called a tagging within the UCelebrate Reader software. We tagged the individual entries. We went to the tags portion and then exported out all the tags in reference to his search items and web history.
And are the items that are depicted on S122 accurate representations of what you reviewed as part of the defendant's search history in his iPhone 11?
They are.
Your Honor, permission to move S122 into evidence and have the witness read from it to the jury. No objection.
S122 in evidence.
Now, is S122 in chronological order or reverse chronological order?
Reverse chronological. The most recent is the highest on the entries.
Could you please start from the earliest date in S122 and describe for the jury the information that's there?
Sure. So the first hit in the Safari web browser on this was a search conducted on March 25th, 2021 at 9:36:31 p.m. The body of the search states, "Will red marks turn into bruises?"
Will red
And
marks
could you
turn into
please
bruises?
move on to the next one?
Sure. Next search is on April 1st, 2021 at 8:43:36 p.m. The search was Neptune non-emergency police.
The next one.
Next search is on April 1st, 2021 at 8:49:05 p.m. The message or the search was Jersey Shore Medical Center.
Please move on to the next one.
The next one is a web history on April 2nd, 2021 at 3:08:37 p.m. The search was lost consciousness, sleepy and nauseous - Google search.
Please move on to the next one.
Next entry is April 2nd, 2021 at 6:10:22 p.m. The search was, can your phone be tracked in airplane mode?
The next one.
The next search was for April 2nd, 2021 at 6:10:35 p.m. for, can my car be tracked?
The next
That's a
one.
daunting
Next search is on
history.
April 3rd, 2021 at 3:14:24 p.m. The search is, what causes a rise in blood sugar in white blood cells?
The next one.
Gotta rip your staple. Can't see the time. Next search was for April 3rd, 2021 at 3:55:40 p.m. The search is, could internal bleeding raise your blood sugar levels?
Please move on to the next one.
The next search is on April 3rd, 2021 at 3:56:55 p.m. The search is, how does gastrointestinal bleeding happen?
Could you please move on to the next one?
Next search is on April 3rd, 2021 at 4:28:21 p.m. The search is, how does gastrointestinal bleeding, how pong to die? It's P-O-N-G, to die.
Could you please move on to the next one?
Sure. Next search is April 3rd, 2021 at 6:55:22 p.m. The search is, can a GI bleed be slow?
Can you please move on to the next one?
Next search is going to be on April 4th, 2021. The value is McGee Tyson Airport, parentheses, TYS, and parentheses, comma, 2055 Alcoa Highway, Alcoa, Tennessee, 37701. Position is parentheses, 35.081033, comma, dash, 83.993889.
Discussing that it will permit the refreshing of the recollection of the witness to determine if there are any prior inconsistent statements that would implicate Rule 613. And so at this time, I'm going to allow you, Mr. Pryor, to publish those excerpts to the witness so she can listen to what was said in the interviews, and then we'll make a determination as to whether or not there are inconsistent statements that may bring into play Rule 613B and how those may be used if you believe impeachment's required.
So the jury's not in.
All right, Exhibit 83 then. And again, without the jury here, I'll allow you to publish the sections you think are relevant in terms of determining whether there's inconsistent statements.
So now he gets to do his questioning on possible impeachment.
I'll have you turn your microphone on, please, Mr. Pryor.
Exhibit number 87 is an interview on 10/23/20 with Officer Kiyakamano and Edwards of Ms. Pastenes as well. That's 87, and 88 would be a interview with Officer Hermosillo and Officer Kiyakamano on 4/29/21 with Ms. Pastenes, and I'm going to have them marked as Exhibit 87 and 88 as well, Judge.
Are you intending to publish any part of those?
I will publish 3 excerpts on those respective exhibits, Judge. As
Okay.
well as
When you do publish, just carefully identify which exhibit is the excerpt is from, so we know that.
Your Honor, may I also inquire to get the timestamp on each publication?
Yeah. The best we can identify what is published, we'll need to have a record of that. Since currently none of these exhibits are admitted.
Whenever the camera,
Judge, on 83, we're going to start at about 24.
whenever the camera goes onto that guy Chris's face, he doesn't mind his facial expressions at all. He looks purely angry. He doesn't do himself favors.
2412, Judge.
All right, you can publish to the witness.
And Judge, it's up on the HDMI, if I could have them.
That was never explained. I don't know. He never said that. I don't think that was ever put in as an option or asked as an option. Actually, that's the first time I ever even thought about that could be an option. That my spirit could actually come back to the body.
So
A possibility.
So did you believe it to be that once your spirit is in limbo and the demon is in your body, in order for that demon to get out, they have to kill your body to get that demon out? Is that how you understood it?
No, because it was understood the way that Chad explained it was that we would expel that demon out of the body put a protection around the body, so no other entity could come in. But they never spoke about killing the body. Do you see that? They only talked about expelling or throwing out or casting out the bad spirit. They never talked about actually killing the body.
Okay, so if you expel that evil spirit and you put a protection around the body, and the good spirit can't come back, the body is basically gonna die, right? The expelling of it causes basically the death of the body, whether that's an intentional harm to the body or just body just had a car accident, dies, or falls over from natural causes and dies. Is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
Judge, that's at 2604.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And Judge, if I could have 87 and 88.
Yes, I'll have the bailiff deliver those.
How do you explain there's no linear thinking in this screwed up spirit world that they have? So it's not like I'd say so, Chopper. It's not like a clean impeachment. You know what I'm saying? And it was Pryor in his questioning that was saying, does that mean that the body is killed? And she just says, if I recall correctly, she's just saying the words yes on the stand. She isn't
Judge, we'll start at,
saying the word kill.
well, 1018. May I publish, Judge?
You may.
Which exhibit number is this?
This is 87.
Yeah, give those over to both. It was that weekend that I told you that was really weird because I had 2 rooms prepared for them. And then I had 2 rooms prepared for them to stay because my kids were out of town. And, so it was just me in the house, so I had prepared the rooms for them to stay at and,
Coming them as.
for Lori, so Serena was gonna stay in my room, and I had a room ready for Lori and another one for Given, and I was gonna take the couch. And, then, Lori and Giv decided that they didn't wanna be in separate rooms, they wanted to sleep together.
Really?
Your Honor, I'm gonna
Yeah.
actually object to
Do you
this.
think there was a physical relationship?
This
going on?
hasn't even been discussed. So if this is gonna be used for impeachment, where we're going with this information has not even come up in any testimony.
Well, I'll note, Mr. Pryor, in order to come in for impeachment, there first has to be relevance, and the relevance is a foundation for potential impeachment. If it's something that could not be a prior inconsistent statement, then it's not relevant under 403, and therefore it doesn't come in. So if this is a topic not yet discussed by the witness on the stand, then I would agree. There's no reason to continue publishing.
And Judge, the way I understood the inquiry is that the court was going to allow me to publish these statements and then I can inquire of the witness. And this statement is not necessarily exclusive to just impeachment, Judge. This statement goes to bias and the relationship between Miss Gibb and Miss Vallow.
Yeah, this is a completely different topic. We're way out of the scope of what we're determining.
Totally out of
in this, and
scope.
So I'm not going to permit 87 to be further published, sustaining the objection of the state. The narrow topic we're on right now, Mr. Pryor, is simply, are there inconsistent statements that have already been offered on the stand by the witness and whether or not they can be impeached?
See how you tried
So I
to
assume
weasel
that
that
with
in
the
there?
court in a later through Mrs. Pastenes's testimony, I'll be able to bring up the subject if there is some issue relating to the relationship between Miss Gibb and Miss Vallow. Is that correct, Judge?
Well, I'm not going to make a advisory ruling for you. What we've got right now is whether or not there's inconsistent statements that can be impeached, and that's the only ruling I'm going to make at this point.
Okay, Judge, could we have a sidebar, please?
We need to keep things moving here, Mr. Pryor, so no. We don't have the jury here, so let's get through this evidence here.
Oh, sidebar denied.
As soon as possible.
Sidebar denied. I mean, I was wondering why he was playing that. It had nothing to do with whether the body dies or is killed as a result of these castings. It was about Lori and Melanie Gibb deciding to sleep in the same room.
4646, Judge?
Of which exhibit?
87.
I don't know. I haven't looked at it for.
Alright.
Very, very
It's been a while.
long.
Okay, I'm just curious. Okay, the next one,
So, and I don't remember whether she was the one that saw this, or maybe I wrote from somewhere else, or maybe she said that. I don't remember this part, but the price for the things I want is a law, a formula, and a covenant. Maybe that's something that she said. I don't remember.
I'm sorry, Judge, I have the
I
wrong
don't
spot.
remember her saying that. But
He needs glasses or something. He can't see the names of the files very well, so he was picking the wrong files. And maybe what that
3534, Judge.
maybe that's what he did at
Same
first.
times that are solidified,
Sanctified.
sanctified, okay.
I'm missing to see there. I don't remember what that
No
was.
worries. Okay, moving on to 12. Give us the background on this page, same
So this
phone
one here is
call.
another phone call with, the, girl said, I guess, I think it was Christina that had created this Gmail, 7 gatherers at Gmail. So that, we would all be able to like share, documents and information with each other that, was things that we were learning so that we could communicate it with each other.
Okay,
So that was that. That's an email address.
did you guys use this quite a bit?
For a little bit, yeah.
Did you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The 7 gatherers at Gmail, and then the 7 lights 144, is that the password to get into it? Is that why you wrote that out? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you still have access to that?
I don't know. I haven't looked at it for.
Right.
Very, very
It's been a while. Okay, I'm just curious. Okay, the next one,
And Judge, the last one under 88, given the court's ruling regarding 87, I'll reserve publishing 88 until after I've crossed the witness about some of the statements relating to that one, okay?
Okay, so the one that was just published, was that off 87 or 83?
That was off 87, and Judge, I have that from 4552 to 4656. And that's the one about the discussion about the 7 gatherers.
All right. So then those have been played. Those were just simply to refresh the recollection of the witness for potential and for reference of the court to see if there's an inconsistent statement with any previous testimony. As I mentioned before, the inquiry is under actually Rule 401 as to whether or not there's any relevance. And then if there's an inconsistent previous statement, that can be considered under Rule 613B. And the court has to have an inquiry first to determine the applicability of the rule. So, Mr. Pryor, what would you argue is an inconsistent statement that allows this to be used to impeach in front of the jury?
Well, Judge, she had mentioned, my recollection of my notes indicate that she said that it was used a few times on this Gmail account about this 7 gatherers. And I believe her testimony with Officer Hermosillo and Officer Kiyakamanu and Officer Edwards was that it seems, I recall the words on the video saying frequently. So that seems to be inconsistent. And what I'm getting at is that this 7 gatherers was used more frequently than what she had originally testified to.
All right. And on the first statement, was there anything else? Because we need to make a ruling on this
And
too.
Judge, in that situation, there was extensive discussion about killing the body and about killing. And although at the end she does say that the end result could be that the body dies, there was at least an insinuation that this process was designed to kill the body. And then her testimony, at least to the police officers, and that would be Officer Hermosillo and Officer Wright, is that there was never talk about killing the body.
All right. Does the state have any response before I make a ruling on essentially what we're doing here is proffering whether or not this exhibit again is admissible? What's the response from the state, Ms. Blake?
Your Honor, I think for it to be admissible, the witness would have to be questioned as well if it were determined to be inconsistent, and see if she denies it or provides any additional input. However, before we even get to that point, the state's argument is these are not inconsistent at all. These are completely consistent with my recollection of Ms. Pastenes's testimony, down to that she thought Christina created that email account. She was open about the fact they use it to communicate and share documents. I don't think there was ever an indication that it was used very rarely. I think to the contrary, she said it was used. In relation to the first one, I think that corresponds completely with what she testified to previously. However, all that being said, at the end of the day, if these clips are going to be asked to be admitted, I don't think the state has an objection. However, we believe that they're completely consistent. So I don't know that they're admissible under for impeachment purposes.
Okay, well, first, there's a practical issue of they're not really clips, they're excerpts out of a nearly at least the 183 is nearly a 4-hour interview, which is very problematic to admit the entire thing to the jury if we're only doing that for a limited purpose of potential impeachment. So I'm still not going to allow the admission of them. You can question and in aid of potential impeachment on that and ask the witness now that she's heard those excerpts. I'll note that under State versus Koch, KOCH 157 Idaho 89, one of the things the court has to determine as to whether or not there's a prior inconsistent statement is the standard of, quote, whenever a reasonable person could infer on comparing the whole effect of the statements that have been produced by inconsistent beliefs. And I don't find that it's risen to the level to get to be a prior inconsistent statement under 613B. So I think the ruling will maintain that I'm not admitting the exhibit proposed. And at this point, we'll just have the jurors return. You can question on cross now that the witness has heard those statements, Mr. Pryor, to see if there's any more inquiry. But at this point, I don't think there's a 613B issue. And so the exhibits are not admitted.
And Judge, can I approach my desk again to pick up some additional documents?
Yes, you can do that. And then let's have the jurors brought in, please.
Another ruling that does not go in Pryor's favor, rending the Magic 8 Ball. Let's ask the Magic 8 Ball. After that ruling, Magic 8 Ball, what are Chad's prospects after this trial? Okay. Magic 8 Ball always knows. Yeah, good point, Rachel. That may be the first time I've noticed Chad actually taking a sip of water. Does that mean things are getting dry for him? Both Chad, I've noticed a lot that Chad's and Pryor's body languages mirror each other. Look at them, the two of them right now. They're almost in the exact same posture. I don't know if I don't think it's a conscious decision. Yeah, if only Chad had more property, right? I just prior, look, he's working hard. He's doing this all by himself. I have to give him the credit that he is due. He's not outright a dumbass, right? He's been doing this for a long time. But I do think that he's a bit careless, and he tries to cut a lot of corners. And maybe it's just because he's tired, maybe it's just because he feels defeated, or maybe it's just the way he is. But yeah, that's true, Patricia. It's getting hot. But he's actually making mistakes that I think, if his client had any kind of a chance, he's ruining, because he's overstepping his bounds. He's overplaying his hand, right? Man, this would be my last case. This would be my last case if I were Pryor. I could tell you that. I mean, he tried to get himself taken off the case last year, but it was probably just a strategic move, because he's not death penalty qualified, and he couldn't find any death penalty qualified people to work with him. Patricia. I highly doubt it. I highly doubt that any of this could be grounds for appeal. I think there are a few grounds for appeal, right? Ineffective assistance of counsel. No, he's not death penalty qualified, Stacy. That was one of the reasons he tried to get himself taken off the case. That was one of the reasons he used to justify getting himself taken off the case. And that was one of the reasons that one lawyer showed up at the last minute trying to get himself involved in the case. That lawyer said that Pryor had reached out to him. That particular lawyer that submitted that last minute motion that got Judge Boyce so worked up and irritated, he is death penalty qualified. So Pryor.
All right, thank you. Please be seated.
Oh, it's not Sebastian Rogers, the one that that was a possible sighting.
All right, the jurors have returned. We're back on the record on case CR 22-21-16-23. I will indicate to the jurors, thank you for your patience. We took an extra long lunch recess working on some matters outside your presence. Given the time here where we're intending to stop at our usual time, we may consider going through without an afternoon break, but I'll check with the jurors to see where things stand and where we are with witnesses before making that determination. But that would probably be a good use of our time if we could just get through the afternoon with no more breaks. So if we're able to do that, we will. And Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to continue on your cause, you may do that at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Pastenes, we were on the subject earlier about castings. And is it your understanding that Chad and Lori never spoke of killing a body during a casting? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. However, it's also your understanding that if a casting is successful and the spirit leaves, it's your understanding that the body dies. Is that what you understand?
Correct.
So what I'm confused about is that um, you spoke earlier about Charles, and you were involved in one of the first castings with him. Is that right?
Yes.
And who was present for that casting?
The first time that there was casting and done on Charles, it was Christina, Nicole, Serena, Gibb, Lori, and I.
So almost the entire 7 gatherers.
Yes.
And was this a 7 gatherer casting that was that you folks had organized?
I don't believe that the email address had been created yet
Okay,
at that time.
okay. And again, in terms of the 7 gatherers, is it your testimony that Gmail originally, when that account was created, that you used that account regularly?
It was used for a little bit. I couldn't tell you how many times or for how many documents were shared in there. I know that it was used, but I can't exactly tell you how many numbers of documents were in there.
And not necessarily a number of documents is what I'm looking for, but rather a description of how often that was used. Would you say that it was used frequently?
Probably.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's go back to the issue with um, the casting of Charles Vallow. And you mentioned that at least 5 or 6 of the 7 gatherers were there engaging in that casting. Is that right?
Yes.
And one of those members of the 7 gatherers was Melanie Gibb, correct?
Yes.
And was Melanie Gibb running that casting?
No.
Lori Vallow?
Yes.
Okay. And at the time, you had indicated that that casting was successful. Is that right?
When Lori called Chad to ask if it had been successful, she returned with saying that it had been successful.
And do you remember when that first casting was?
It was towards the end of March of 2019.
And at the successful completion of that casting, did you get notice that Charles Vallow died as a result of that successful casting?
So I think that the things that Chad and Lori were teaching was that the person that was that the person had already died originally, and that there was a 2-minute window where an evil spirit could come into that spirit, into that body. So in actuality, what they were teaching was that the body was already dead and it was being occupied by a evil spirit. So I guess it would be more accurate to say that if a casting worked, then the body would finally die naturally.
So if a body would finally die naturally, then when the casting was successful, Charles Vallow didn't die though. Did he?
Are you asking about the spirit or are you asking about the body?
I'm asking about the body.
The body. Okay, so the body would have been the body of Charles Vallow, but
Okay.
it would have been occupied by an evil spirit.
All right. Then there was a second casting, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, and again, that was a successful casting of again Charles Vallow's body again, correct?
According to Chad and Lori, yes.
Okay. And when you say according to Chad and Lori, isn't it true, ma'am, that almost all of the information you got was from Lori Vallow claiming Chad made a comment about a certain topic?
Correct.
And it wasn't really Chad who spoke to you about any of these things. It was Lori Vallow who was telling you about all of this casting and energy work, correct?
Not all of it, what came through her, some stuff came through, Chad as well.
Okay, well, let me rephrase that then. The vast majority of the information you received was from Lori Vallow claiming to say what Chad Daybell told her. Is that fair?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you talked a little bit about the fact that Lori moved back into Texas with Charles. And when was that?
I don't have a specific date of that
You don't remember,
recollection. No,
remember that? Okay. Okay.
I know it was in 2019, but I don't know when.
You were pretty specific about all of the questions when the prosecutor asked you questions about dates and times and comments.
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative, and the counsel's testifying, move to strike.
Sustained.
Isn't it true, ma'am, that you were quite specific about your testimony in responding to the prosecutor's
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
My goodness, what the
Overruled.
hell?
Isn't it true, ma'am, that you were quite specific in your responses to the prosecutor about her questions?
Yes,
And yet, when I ask you about a question about Texas and Lori Vallow, you don't remember. Is that correct?
I don't remember the date, no.
Okay. Do you remember Lori moving to Hawaii in 2019?
Yes,
In early of 2019, February, do you recall that?
yeah, it was around February, March, somewhere around there.
And do you recall the length of time that she was living in Hawaii during that time?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you know whether or not JJ was with her during the time that she was in Hawaii for February and March?
To my knowledge, JJ was not with her,
To your knowledge, where was JJ?
with Charles.
Okay. And then subsequent to that stay in Hawaii, she then, I don't want to use the word reconcile, but got back together with Charles. Is that right?
Yes,
And at that point, she indicated that she was trying to clear up some financial issues.
yes,
Did she go into detail that she was trying, did she ever mention to you that she was trying to convince Charles to make her the beneficiary of her life insurance again?
no,
But she did talk about financial issues, correct?
yes, she just said that she needed to get her finances taken care of.
Okay. Now, you were present at the Mesa conference, correct? And ma'am, do you have a phone or something you're looking at?
No, have my hands.
Okay. You were at the Mesa conference, is that correct?
Yes,
And then you were also at the St. George conference.
yes.
He's
Do
so
you ever recall at both of those conferences if Chad talked about knowing that he had a vision about Tammy's, short life?
Not that I recall.
Okay. You spoke about portals. Do you remember the prosecutor talking to you about portals?
Yes,
Okay, and you mentioned that not, and your comment was something to the effect, not in that context. Other than what Chad and Lori may have told you about portals, what is your knowledge of portals?
not very much.
Okay. So prior to that time, you never learned anything or knew anything of portals?
No, not other than movies, but
Okay. Okay. You mentioned that the first time, and I believe this is what you said, is the first time you heard the word zombies was from Melanie Gibb in February of 2019. Is that correct?
yes, from Melanie and Lori.
Okay, so they were the ones who first used the term zombies, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And then Melanie also spoke to you, or excuse me, Lori also spoke to you about the fact that she was relying on the income from JJ and Tylee to support herself. Is that right?
yes,
Okay. And there was some discussion about Melanie having enough money for all of us. And that was Melanie Pulowski.
Yes,
That was not Melanie Gibb.
correct.
And Judge, could I have exhibit 54B and exhibit 54?
Yes, we'll provide those to you.
And Judge, with the court's permission, I'd like to publish exhibit 54B.
54B has been admitted and you can publish that.
So, ma'am, I'm looking at 54B and I'm a bit confused with the numeric system. It appears that at the top, it's starting as a 6. Is that right? Do you see that? Where it says D and L,
Yes,
and then as we progress down, it goes down to a 1.
yes.
So again, it's just a matter of me being a little unclear about what this means. So do I understand that you start down as a 1 and you progress up to the higher number?
Yes,
Okay, so the higher number you are on the light scale, the better it is?
yes,
And the higher number you are on the dark scale, the worse you are. Is that what that illustrates?
yes.
And who told you that?
This particular drawing was done by Lori
Okay,
at a luncheon.
okay. And Chad wasn't present for that, right?
No, he was not there.
Okay. And then Judge, could I go to may I have permission to publish 54?
Yes.
So I'm looking at exhibit 54 and I'm looking at the numeric system again. And do you see where the 1 is?
Yes,
Top? And then just to the side of that is a number of circles with lines on top. Can you explain to me what that means?
I don't remember why I did that.
Okay. But what I noticed in this illustration, and who provided this one to you?
This is my own writing.
But you were relying on what? Memory of a visit with who?
This will be memory on some of the stuff that Lori had done on the prior writing and also on the information that Chad had given me in regards to my prior lives
And was that in person that Chad gave you that information?
over the phone.
Okay. And again, the numbering system here, it looks like you have the 1 at the top and then it works itself down to a 6. So on this particular illustration, which way are we, if we're trying to be as light as possible, which direction are we trying to go in?
You're going from the 1 to the 6.
You're going down then.
I guess it really doesn't matter whether you're going up or down. It's just whether you're going from a 1 to a 6.
Okay. So in this illustration, however, that you're on the previous illustration, you talked about going up to a higher number, and that's where I became a little confused. In this illustration, you're talking about starting at the top and going down. So the way you're understanding at least this illustration is you needed to go down to a 6 to be lighter. Is that right?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony.
Sustained.
Do you understand that you need to go from a 1 to a 6 in a downward direction to become lighter?
The way that Chad and Lori were teaching this was that you would go from a 1 to a 6. I'm not too sure if I understand your question on the way that it was written, whether up or down.
Okay, well, I'm just pointing out that on this particular illustration, you drew the arrow in a downward direction. That doesn't mean anything then. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you have any recollection of talking to other folks about instances where you've had visions of your own?
Yes.
Okay. And in some of those instances, did you ever talk to people about having energy sessions and then these visions came to you without the urging of anybody else?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall talking about cutting and destroying cords, and that as part of your progress that you experienced visions and it involved the cutting of cords and the destroying of all the records around you? Do you recall that?
No, I don't.
And Judge, could I will represent, this is from Lori Firststyle, iCloud.com. And I'd like to refresh the witness's recollection with this. If I could have the bailiff approach, Judge.
You may.
So Pryor mentioned that Zulema has immunity, but didn't bring that up with either of the Melanies, which makes me wonder.
If you would just read that for me, I would appreciate it. Don't then just set it down or return it, have it returned to me, and then we'll talk about it.
Hey, beautiful. I just had an energy session.
No. Just read it to your, I apologize, Judge. I wasn't clear.
No, you were clear. Ms. Pastenis, this is just to refresh your recollection, but please don't read it expressly so the jurors can hear. You may just take a moment, read that to yourself, and once you're done, the questioning can continue.
So he didn't bring up immunity with either of the Melanies, which leads me to believe that neither of the Melanies.
Okay, and Mr. Bailiff, if I could have that returned to me.
And it seems like they would need immunity, but maybe Zulema needs more immunity because she was married to Al.
Did you have an opportunity to review that email?
Yes.
And there was some discussion about having an energy session with a friend, Stacy. Do you recall that?
Yes.
What kind of energy session was that?
It was a session where the person connects to your energy and then sees if there is anything that would be a negative energy or anything that would be influence you negatively, and that person will remove it.
Okay, and then I noted that in this, you said, "Hey, beautiful," and do you recall who this was sent to?
No, I don't.
And Judge, if I could refresh your recollection, and ma'am, if you could look at the date and who it was to, and then review the note again, and then let me know when you're ready. Do you recall when this was sent?
Yes,
And when was it?
February 2019.
Okay, and who was it sent to?
It was sent to Lori.
And it talks about, the comment is, "Hey, beautiful," that you're referring to Lori Vallow at that point. Is that correct?
Yes,
And letting her know you just had an energy session with a friend, Stacy. Do you recall that?
yes.
Now, this wasn't a situation where Lori encouraged you to have this energy session. Is that right?
I don't recall.
Well,
I don't think that she would have, but
okay, this was something that you took upon yourself to have an energy session with your friend Stacy, correct?
yes,
Okay. And said something about she was able to take metal cage that was put around me to block me from visions. What are they talking about? Someone putting a metal cage around you and blocking you from visions by Stacy.
this would be something that is energetically speaking, so it wouldn't be something that is physical.
Okay, it's a spiritual thing.
Mhm.
Okay, is this something that's consistent with your LDS beliefs?
No,
Okay, it's something that's outside of your LDS beliefs.
yes,
Okay. And then there was a mention of she cut the cords and destroyed all the records he was keeping of me. What are we talking about there?
I don't recall who I was talking about.
And who was keeping all the records of you?
I don't recall who.
Okay.
I have very little memory of that text or email, whatever it was.
And then at the bottom, and this was in February 13th of 2019. Do you recall putting in your statement, "I will create a storm and bring protection to you"? Do you recall that?
Mhm.
And what kind of storm are we bringing?
Yes, thank you.
For once, it wasn't me. What do you mean by "I will bring a storm and bring protection to you"?
It would be actually done energetically and spiritual as well.
Okay, so what kind of spiritual storm are we talking about?
It would be something that you imagine in your mind of sending protection to someone.
Okay. And then, do you recall sending another email to Lori Vallow about being attacked one night and hearing an unrecognizable voice next to you?
I believe so.
Okay, do you remember when that was?
No, sir.
And Judge, again, I'd like to refresh your recollection with another opportunity.
All right.
I think I remember seeing this email in Discovery a long time ago. A lot of this language is very similar to the language that you can hear used in Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Frankie's communications with themselves and, like in their journals and among themselves. The spirits are attacking
ready?
me.
And do you recall that this was on 12/19 of 2018?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall mentioning something, and do you recall who this was sent to?
Lori.
Okay. And do you recall mentioning that you were attacked while you were sleeping? Do you recall reading that?
Yes.
What were you attacked by while you were sleeping?
According to that, I was attacked by some demons.
Okay, so when you sent this message to Lori that you were attacked, you were indicating to her that while you were sleeping that night on the 19th, you were attacked by demons. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that you said to Lori that you heard a voice of something unrecognizable next to you. Do you recall what that was?
Yes, I recalled.
And
What I
then you
just read.
mentioned, I'm sorry.
I said I recall what I just read.
And do you recall mentioning in the email that you saw demons and very dark ones attacking you?
Yeah, in my dream.
Okay. Did Chad tell you to say that you saw demons that night while you were sleeping?
No,
Did Lori tell you that night, while you were sleeping, that you were being attacked by demons and
No.
dark ones?
no,
That was your statement of something you experienced without the prompting of Lori or Chad. Is that right?
yes,
You said you woke up with a lot of pain again, same place. Third eye and crown. What does that mean?
it's your forehead,
It's a what?
your forehead
Okay.
area.
There's a third eye on the forehead?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Overruled.
Is there a third eye on the forehead?
Energetically, the area of the forehead right between your eyes is called the third eye.
Okay. And that's energetically?
Yes.
You don't actually see a third eye on your forehead at night when you're sleeping, do you?
No, sir.
Okay. And then you mentioned to Lori that at the end of this on 12/19/2018, asking her if you guys could meet at the temple sometime the next day, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall talking to Lori Vallow about protecting her?
Yes, I did that in the past.
Okay, and do you remember when you did that,
No,
Mr. Bailiff? Sorry, I'm gonna work you today.
Rachel, I think he's trying to show that without Chad's influence, she still had these beliefs about demons and energy work. And
And Your Honor, may the state inquire what the witness was just shown?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I could have it brought back and show you, counsel, if you'd like. I apologize, I should have done that.
I don't know if it has an exhibit number, but
Doesn't, it's just to refresh your recollection, but when she's done,
that's fine. Just wanted to make sure we know.
we're gonna exchange here. So you get those back. Do you recall now that it was on the 3rd of November of 2018?
yes.
Okay, now remind me again. When do you recall Lori first met Chad?
October 2018.
Okay. And that was at the end of 2018, is that right?
In the fall of 18. Mhm.
End of October, though. Was the St. George was the end of October?
I know it's in October. I don't know exactly the day.
Okay. And do you recall talking to Lori Vallow about, you got a clear message that you are to be protected. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And this was from you to her, correct?
Yes.
And you were sending her a message saying, I'm getting a clear message that you're to be protected. So where were you getting this message from?
During my meditations and prayers.
Okay. And is that part of your LDS faith?
Yes.
Okay. So during part of your LDS faith, you're meditating and you're praying, and you got a clear message that Lori Vallow is to be protected, right?
Yes.
And then you went on to say that when I'm asked if I'm supposed to be one of your protectors, the answer was if angels were jumping for joy, saying yes, 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 3 times. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. So as part of your meditation and your prayer, on the night of 11/3/2008, or the day before, you were having angels telling you that Lori Vallow should be protected and you should be her protector. Is that what I understand that to be?
I believe that you misstated that.
Okay. Well,
I believe I said it was as if angels were saying yes, yes, yes 3 times.
oh, was it?
Am I incorrect on that?
No, you're correct.
Okay.
You're correct. But when I asked, who did you ask if you were to be Lori Vallow's protector?
I was in prayer, so I was during prayer and meditation. I usually talk to God.
Okay. So when you were talking to God as part of your meditation and prayer, you got a definitive yes, yes, yes that you were to be Lori Vallow's protector. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a feeling of yes.
So that was a divine direction to you that that you are to protect Lori Vallow. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Do I understand this message to mean that you are to be, you part of your role, at least at that time, was to protect Lori Vallow?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
I'll sustain the objection.
All right.
Sustained.
All right. All right. Okay. 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 Sit up, Chad. It's never gonna get
Do
any.
you have a recollection of sending an email to a number of folks about angels talk to men and women?
No.
I think Chad stole a lot of people's ideas. He stole Zuli's ideas. He stole Julie Rowe's ideas. He stole from Old Wives' Tales with the pendant. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Do you recall having the email on 4/14/2019 regarding angels talking to women, men and women?
Yeah, now that I read it.
I noted that there are a number of names there. There's Melanie Gibb, Christina Atwood, Nicole Earle, Melanie Boudreau, Pulowski, right? Same person.
Yes.
Zuluma, Serena Sharp, and April, right?
Sulema.
Zulema, I'm sorry.
I'm glad.
And you've talked about Lori as a witness of that as well.
Yes.
And when you say angels still talk to men and women, is that implying that men and women are both good?
No, not implying that.
What does that mean when angels still talk to men and women?
Hey, Tiggy.
I believe that in that email or text, I was referring to the testimony that Lori had given, saying that she had visitations with angels and that she had received directions and visitations from angels.
And those visitation were angels weren't ordained by Chad. Those were visions that she had on her own. Is that right?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Do you have knowledge of whether Chad encouraged her to have visions with these angels?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And the names that I just read off, would those be the 7 gatherers?
Yes, they were part of that
Okay.
email.
So that email that you sent out on 4/14 to Melanie Gibb and those other folks were in reference to your discussion about the angels. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that right?
And then do you recall sending Lori Vallow a message about having a vision in the celestial room?
Probably, yes.
Do you remember the date of that?
No.
Okay.
So he,
Do you recall the date of it now?
Yes.
11/29/18, is that right?
Yes.
Um, you made mention, hey, love, I'm leaving now. Is that to Lori Vallow?
Yes.
Okay. Have to go to work. LOL. What's funny about going to work?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
I have to go to work. LOL. What does that mean?
Didn't have any meaning behind it.
Okay, just a comment you made.
Just a comment.
Okay. Then you went on to say, I had the most amazing vision in the celestial room today. And that was on 11/29. Where was the celestial room?
In the temple.
Okay, so you were in the temple and you were letting Lori know that you were there on that day, right?
Yes.
And that you had a vision, correct?
Yes.
Now, that was about a month after you met Chad. Did Chad tell you to have that vision?
No.
come on.
Did Lori tell you to have that vision?
No.
Did anybody tell you to have that vision?
Nobody would tell you to have a vision.
Right, you have a vision on your own, correct?
Correct.
And when you have some sort of spiritual intervention, it's not necessarily someone telling you that you're having that. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor, 610.
Sustained.
And then you went on to say, I have to tell you about it. You were going to tell Lori about your vision, right?
Yes.
And then you said something about, are you going to Melanie's tomorrow night? Would that be Melanie Gibbs?
I don't remember.
So the date was 11/29/2018.
Hmm.
So 11/30/2018, you were going over to some Melanie's house that night, right?
Apparently, yes.
And where were you living at that time?
Gilbert.
Okay. Where was Melanie Gibb living at that time?
Gilbert.
Okay. And Lori Vallow at that time?
Chandler.
She would have been living in either, I believe she was living in Gilbert or Chandler, that area.
Now have you heard the accusations about Brandon Boudreaux? Is that right?
What accusations?
About someone allegedly shooting at Brandon Boudreaux, Melanie Pulaski's ex?
Yes, I heard of that.
Okay. And do you know who's accused of doing that?
Yes,
And who is that?
Alex Cox.
Okay. Did you have any involvement in planning the shooting of Brandon Boudreaux?
No,
Okay. Did you know about the fact that he was going to do that?
no.
Okay. And again, ma'am, if we could just go over this very quickly. You initially met Alex Cox when?
I met him at the conference in November of 2018.
Okay. So now you remember it's November of 2018, not October of 2018 was the conference?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative, and this was asked and answered.
Sustained.
The conference in November of 2018, was that the conference Chad was speaking at?
There was a conference in Mesa, Arizona in November of 2018, and Chad was speaking at the conference, and he also had a table where he was selling books.
Was that in St. George or was that in Mesa?
I just said it was in Mesa
Okay. And then when was the St. George conference?
in October
What year?
2018.
Okay. So you met Alex in November of 2018, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, you noted that, at least to your knowledge, Alex and Chad were not close or knew each other, correct?
They were not close,
Okay.
but they didn't appear to be.
Now, you've heard the allegations regarding Charles Vallow, is that right?
What allegations?
That Charles Vallow was shot?
Yes,
And do you know who is accused of shooting Charles Vallow?
yes,
Are you aware that initially that was determined to be a self-defense?
yes,
And then subsequently, the police officers changed their thoughts on that, is that right?
yes.
Are you also aware that Chad Daybell has not been criminally implicated in that allegation?
No, I was not aware of that.
So then you met Alex in November of 2018, and then you didn't start dating him at that point, is that correct?
No,
You started dating him in about August of 2019?
yes.
Okay. And then how often would you see him in August of 2019?
I saw him at a few times in Lori's house, and then one time in August we went out to dinner together.
Okay, so one dinner date in August of 2019.
Mhm.
And then when again did you get engaged?
In November of 2019.
So between August and November, when you got engaged, how many dates did you go on?
Relevant, Your Honor. Objection.
Overruled.
We saw each other about 3 times before then.
All right, so you saw each other 3 times and then you got engaged in November. Do you remember when in November you got engaged?
I believe it was November 7th.
And then the marriage took place when?
At the end of November.
And Judge, may I have just a moment to go through my notes?
Yes. you
Thank
may.
you, Your Honor. Oh.
Not looking good, Chad. Not looking too good for you. The testimony today has been very
As
important.
part of your testimony today, were you interviewed or prepared for by anybody prior to your testimony? Help in preparation?
I had interviews with prosecution.
Okay, when did that take place?
When I arrived in Boise Sunday night.
Prior to that time, it appears that you've been interviewed by a number of police officers. Is that fair?
Yes,
And do you have any idea how many police officers have interviewed you?
No,
Okay. You remember discussing your case with Officer Hermosillo?
in what occasion?
Or 2921 in Arizona?
Yeah, I believe that was one of the interviews I had with them.
Do you remember that interview?
Parts of it, yes.
Okay, was there ever a time that there was a discussion about attempting to make your testimony credible?
I don't recall that.
Judge, could I have a sidebar, please?
Yes.
Interesting. So he wants potentially to bring in evidence where Detective Hermosillo and her talk about, I'm sure it's a nothing burger, everything that Pryor brings in as potential impeachment testimony or evidence ends up being a nothing burger. Something that he is misconstruing, overstretching, making nothing into something, like trying to compare the way she talked about castings then and how she talks about them now. And, it's funny when you're trying to impeach a witness on such vague and esoteric testimony as, Chad's weird spiritual abuse system. I mean, what this all boils down to is spiritual abuse. Every person other than law enforcement who's been on the stand is a victim of, in one way, shape, or form, of spiritual abuse, including the murder victims in this case. All spiritual abuse. And in my view, that's some of the worst abuse people can suffer, because you're literally taking their faith.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are going to take up a hopefully quick evidentiary issue that will take a moment to publish something outside of your presence. So I am going to have you take a quick break here. Should take, I would think, 10 to 15 minutes to do this. So I'll have you retire from the courtroom briefly while we take care of that. We'll let you know when we're ready to come back in with more evidence.
All right, please.
So they'll probably let us see this. So we'll keep hanging here. If they don't let us see this, I'm going to show you all some testimony from earlier in the Karen Reed trial, where one of the cops gets pulled apart for using solo cups as a means of preserving evidence. And I haven't watched.
All right, you can be seated.
But looks like they're going to let us watch. Please remember to hit the thumbs up. Thank you very much.
All right, we discussed on a sidebar there, and I'll note now the jurors are not present, but for purposes of refreshing the witness's recollection, I am going to permit the publishing to the witness a portion of an exhibit that I don't believe has been admitted. So identify what it is you're publishing as well as you can, Mr. Pryor, including any timestamp on it, and I'll permit that.
Judge, this is a tape recording from 4/29/21 between Officer Hermosillo, Officer Giacomo. I think counsel for Ms. Pastenes, Mr. Smith, and Ms. Smith, and a discussion regarding credibility.
All right, once you have that teed up, just indicate what exhibit number proposed it would be and where you're playing it from.
And Judge, I'm proposing that it's exhibit number 88 by the defense. I'm going to be, I'll represent to the court that it's 1 hour, 57 minutes and 43 seconds is the entire tape. I am going to attempt to try to start this at 7 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay,
And I would like to put this up on the HDMI if I may, Your Honor.
yes, you may.
As we've been going over things, we've been going over reports that you have given to Gilbert initially with Alex's death. And some of those statements that you gave them don't match what you gave us the last time we talked. So I just wanted to clarify kind of why you told them something completely different. Okay? So when I was discussing last time with you, about.
Was this the day that Alex died? Is that what you're talking about?
The day Alex died. So do you remember anything that you told those guys as far as Lori and Chad or?
Very, very little. I don't remember much of what happened. To tell you the truth, there's a part of like between like 2 weeks there that there isn't much, it's very foggy for me. But that night specifically, there are certain things that I remember, but not all of it. And I don't remember, like, I can't put a timeline together. Like, I don't know what happened first and what happened next. I don't know which one was first and which one was second. I really don't. I've been trying to put it together, but I haven't been able to.
We've also never seen what, statements she's purported to have made, so it's,
Well, I can let you look at a copy, but so when Gilbert Police, let me just preface this. We're just trying to eliminate some of the things maybe defense for Lori and Chad are going to bring up during trial. Okay. And part of that defense could be that they try to pin this on other people, right? So, or make you not look as credible as what you are in case you have to testify.
Mhm.
So in order for us to make you look credible and to use what you say in court, we want to kind of jump out ahead of any type of defense that they're going to bring up. And try to make it look like you are lying or are trying to get back at them or something like that. So in going over these reports, that's kind of what we are doing to make sure that everything that you told us kind of matches what has happened, right? And so when we were going over Gilbert's reports, there's some things in there that you said that you told us about when you last talked to Chad and Lori, and about when you, well, I'll just come out and ask you. You told Gilbert that you had no idea how to get a hold of Lori and Chad when they asked you who Alex was. Can you tell me why you told him that?
Judge, that I believe was at, I believe it ended at, I think 10:10, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll note the times, then the witness has been able to hear that. And so at this point, we can have the jurors return. And then if you wish to question on that, I'll just note for your benefit, Mr. Pryor, looking at this previous response and question, the question you posed was there ever a time that there was a discussion about attempting to make your testimony credible? And the witness answered, I do not recall that.
Okay.
So that's where we left off before the issue came up, and we'll have the jurors return. Okay, we're fine. Everybody wants to just stand up and take a break or whatever we may. Also, it's going to take the jurors a few more minutes to get back in.
Well, they're on a break. Let's watch this.
Completely open,
Yes.
unsecured,
Yes.
and available to anybody who wanted access to it.
Correct.
One of the reasons to
This is about the
secure a
solo
crime
cups.
scene is to minimize the possibility of evidence destruction on one hand, correct?
Yes.
And evidence tampering.
And just to be clear, this isn't about Solo, who's raised a very kind daughter, obviously. But it's about the Solo cups. About the Solo cups that were used to preserve evidence in the Karen Reed case.
On the other hand, right?
Sure.
And examples of evidence tampering could be just moving a piece of evidence.
Objection, Your Honor.
That's overruled. Just not too much further with this, though.
I've just got a couple of quick questions about this.
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure. An example or a couple of examples of evidence tampering could be something as simple as moving a piece of evidence, moving it from here to here, correct?
That would be tampering, yes.
Hiding evidence, getting rid of it, right?
Yes.
Taking evidence out of the scene or putting evidence back into the scene, correct?
Yes.
Or even planting evidence that didn't exist before. All of those would be examples of tampering with evidence.
Yes.
And setting up a proper crime scene minimizes or eliminates the possibility for that.
Setting up a crime scene would could you say that again, please?
Sure. Setting up a proper crime scene, securing a proper crime scene minimizes or tries to eliminate the possibility of that type of evidence tampering. Obviously.
It would, but at this point in time, we weren't aware. At this point in time, state police had said they weren't responding. So there was no longer an area to preserve at that point.
So in your mind, well, let me phrase it a different way. What that means is after 8 a.m., that scene was just open.
It was.
You found both the blood that we saw pictures of and the cocktail glass that we were just introduced to this morning, correct?
Yes.
You searched the area that was adjacent to where you believed the body was.
That was a very short break, and they're back. So
Judge, with the court's permission, may I ask that the court reporter read back the last question?
Yes. And to clarify there, Madam Reporter, that would be the question posed before we talked about, breaking the sidebar. Yeah, the same one I read back just momentarily ago.
First time that there was a discussion, that's one credit answer I did not follow.
You've had an opportunity now to review an interview between you and Officer Hermosillo, is that right?
Yes.
And your previous testimony was that in terms of someone trying to make your testimony more credible, do you have a better recollection of that situation?
Yes.
And at that time, in your discussions with Officer Hermosillo, Was there a discussion about attempting to make your testimony more credible?
Yes,
And was there a discussion about you making inconsistent statements to other police agencies and that Officer Hermosillo was trying to reconcile those two inconsistencies?
yes, he was trying to reconcile.
And at that point, was it also your discussion with Officer Hermosillo that he was trying to make it so that they could minimize how a defense attorney may attack you in terms of those inconsistent statements?
Yes,
And was it your understanding that Officer Hermosillo was trying to put you in a position where you would testify in order that you wouldn't be as vulnerable to attack by the defense counsel?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Was it your understanding that Officer Hermosillo was aiding you in trying to make it so that defense counsel could not attack you about your inconsistent statements to various police agencies?
yes.
And Officer Hermosillo again is who?
He's one of the law enforcement that interviewed me.
From the Rexburg Police Department?
Yes,
In addition, Officer Kia Kamano was there as well, is that right?
yes,
And your attorney was there as well, right?
yes,
Was it your understanding as part of that meeting that what you were attempting to do was to get your story straight when you had to testify in a trial of this case?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative misstates the evidence
Yeah.
or
Overruled.
testimony.
Oh,
It's
and it's
overruled.
overruled.
Is it your understanding that what Officer Kia Kamano of the Rexburg Police Department, Officer Hermosillo of the Rexburg Police Department, and your lawyer and you were trying to get your story straight about all the inconsistent statements you made to various police
Objection, Your
agencies?
Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
As sustained, I strike the question.
I mean, he was basically yelling at her.
Officer Hermosillo was trying to make your testimony more credible, is that right?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Sustained.
You had previously heard about inconsistent statements you may have made to various agencies, is that right?
yes,
And Officer Hermosillo talked about minimizing the impact of defense counsel in your questioning, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Sustained.
And the purpose of that meeting was just so that you would be able to get your story straight, was it not, ma'am?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered. Argumentative.
Sustained.
What do you understand the purpose of Officer Hermosillo telling you that he was trying to make you credible in front of a jury?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
That was not asked, Judge.
It's overruled. You can answer the question, ma'am.
Stop cutting
Madam,
people off.
Madam Clerk, would you read back that question for me, please?
Look at Chad. He is bolt upright. He's like, I think we're getting somewhere. I think we're getting somewhere.
my understanding was that there was some inconsistencies and he wanted to clarify them
Stop.
to, just like he said, to be ahead of what you're doing right now.
And the discussion was directly to you that we were trying to get ahead of the defense counsel so that we were prepared for the potential attack on all of the inconsistent statements that you have made. Is that right?
Objection, Your Honor. This is argumentative.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Strike that question.
So getting ahead of the curve, what do you mean by getting ahead of the curve?
I didn't say ahead of the curve. Did I say ahead of the curve?
What do you recall Officer Hermosillo saying, getting ahead of what?
Objection, Your Honor. These have been asked and answered.
Overruled.
If you don't remember, Judge, we can refresh your recollection once again.
I prefer you just continue on with cross, Mr. Pryor.
He was saying if the judge doesn't remember.
Do you believe it was the intent of your discussion with Officer Hermosillo on that day of 4/29 of 21 to prepare you to testify today?
Yes,
And you believe that as part of that preparation, he was discussing with you how we can, you folks, you, your lawyer, Officer Kia Kamano and Officer Hermosillo, can frame your testimony in a way that resolves some of the.
Objection, Your Honor. This is argumentative and it's misstating the testimony. And it's been
Sustained.
asked and answered.
It's sustained.
Judge, I want the witness to go back and have to review the,
Well, there hasn't been any response, Mr. Pryor, that she doesn't recall. It's just been some sustained objections in the way you're framing the questions. So just ask additional questions and then we'll see if she needs to be refreshed or not.
do you specifically recall what Officer Hermosillo referenced when he said he was trying to get you ahead of something?
yes.
What did he say?
He said that he was trying to get ahead of what you're doing right now.
So in other words, he was aiding you in resolving different statements you may have made in the past.
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative and mischaracterizes the testimony.
Sustained.
I wish she would just say of you accusing of
Move to strike as well.
being involved.
It is
What-
stricken and it is stricken and I'll reiterate, and I may not have done this before. When I indicate things are stricken, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that means you are to disregard that and not consider it in any way in your deliberations. And I've said that on multiple occasions here, but that's just a clarifying instruction from the court at this time. Mr. Pryor, you can continue.
And what did you understand when Officer Hermosillo was trying to get us ahead of something? What exactly was he trying to get ahead of for your benefit?
Objection, Your Honor. This has been asked and answered multiple times.
Sustained.
Isn't it true, ma'am, that the purpose of your meeting with Officer Hermosillo was to mold your testimony in a certain way today?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered misstates the testimony.
Overruled.
Okay.
Isn't it true that the
Oh,
purpose?
Mr. Pryor,
I'm sorry.
there was a
Judge.
question posed. She didn't answer yet. Let's see if she answers the question, please.
No, it was not to mold it.
Okay. What do you believe the purpose was?
Objection, Your Honor. This has been asked and answered multiple times.
Sustained. It's sustained, Mr. Pryor, and we're not gonna keep going down the same path of asked and answered. So you either need to change topics or we need to move on one way or another.
At any other time, did you meet with a police officer to discuss the credibility of your previous testimony?
Not that I recall.
So this would have been the only instance where you were with a police officer discussing that very topic. Is that right?
I believe so.
And would you agree with Officer Hermosillo that in the past, in talking with police officers and law enforcement agencies, that you have had an occasion to tell inconsistent stories about the circumstances regarding this case?
Objection, Your Honor. This is argumentative and it mischaracterizes the testimony.
Overruled.
And Ms. Clerk, would you please read back the question for me?
Before this, Chad was sitting straight bolt upright as if Pryor was getting somewhere. And now he's like, nope, that didn't work. I'm slumping.
During that meeting, we were talking about something that I had said that I have no recollection of. There are plenty of times during of that day, that evening and the following days that I have no recollection of.
Do you have a recollection of Officer Hermosillo mentioning to you that you've given inconsistent statements in the past?
Yes.
Okay, Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right.
Redirect. Oh God. That was a,
Once you're ready, Ms. Blake, you can conduct any redirect.
I think Zulema handled him pretty well. Although I think she should have just said right out that
Ms. Pastenis, you were asked if you met with the prosecution. Do you recall that question?
Yes,
And have you met with me before?
yes,
Has anything I told you altered your testimony?
no,
Have any questions I ask you had any kind of an effect on your recollection?
no,
And is your testimony today based on your recollection of events?
yes,
And you were asked about the inconsistent statement, and you indicated it was given during a time that you don't have a lot of recollection. Is that correct?
yes. It was, this, somebody was asking me, supposedly somebody was asking me a question, during the time when Alex was in the emergency room and they were doing, CPR and resuscitation. And I have no recollection of anything that happened, that night.
So your husband was in the emergency room.
Yes, he had stopped breathing.
And ultimately he passed away.
Yes,
Overruled.
When you met with Detective Hermosillo, Detective Kaikamanu, and your counsel, did you do more than just discuss those brief statements given to Gilbert?
yes,
In fact, was a complete interview done?
yes. There were many interviews done,
And you discussed a lot more than that in that interview, is that correct?
probably more than likely.
And you were asked about who it was that you would generally communicate with about these spiritual teachings of Chad and Lori's. Do you recall that question?
Yes,
Was it Lori that you would usually talk to?
yes.
Do you know where the ideas originated from?
The ideas originated from Chad.
And do you recall talking about that preparing a people conference in November of 2018 in Arizona?
Yes, I remember that.
And do you recall talking about another gathering at Lori's house that was around that same time?
Yes,
And again, who was it that was teaching about the translation process?
it was Chad.
And Lori wasn't teaching. Oh, translation process.
It was Chad.
Was Lori teaching?
No, she was sitting with us on the couch as the student, not the teacher.
Did Chad stay at Lori's house in November of 2018?
Yes,
Were there any other men there?
no man.
nope.
Were you with Chad or Lori the whole time at that gathering at Lori's house?
No, I left shortly after they gave me a blessing.
So you wouldn't know if they had any interactions when you weren't present.
Correct.
Were Chad's teachings part of the standard LDS teachings?
No,
Did you believe at that time that Chad could in fact discern light people from dark people?
yes, he had indicated that since he had had a near-death experience and he didn't have a veil, that he could communicate with the spirit world and that he had information that perhaps other people, like normal people, wouldn't have. So yes, I did believe that he could discern that.
Spiritual abuse, right.
You were shown a message that referenced the cutting of cords. Do you recall that? Defense
Yes.
counsel showing you that? Where did you learn the idea of cutting of cords?
There was something that Lori and Chad were teaching in regards to how a spirit needs to be attached to the body by certain amount of cords, and how those cords would be cut before a person would be dying.
And I think council asked you about Chad telling you, or Chad and Lori telling you that you had some spiritual gifts with being able to discern the weather.
Yes.
And is that who told you you had those gifts?
Yeah, Chad did.
And Chad told you to practice that?
Yeah.
And where did you learn the idea or first learn of spiritual attacks?
I think the first time I've ever heard read from it was in the scriptures when there was mentions of people being possessed and attacked by evil spirits.
And did Chad and Lori talk about spiritual attacks as well?
Yes.
Did the way they describe them differ from what you'd read before?
Yes. It was a much more detailed way that they were teaching it.
And did they talk to you about spiritual weapons?
Yes.
Did you ever turn to Chad to ask for assistance with spiritual weapons?
Yes.
Did he tell you that he could help with that?
Yes.
Did he tell you whether he could send spiritual weapons?
He has said that he could actually visualize them and then remove them.
And you were asked a lot about the Seven Gatherers.
Yeah.
The Seven Gatherers was a Gmail account, is that right?
Yes.
And in that Gmail account, 7 people had access?
Yes.
And the idea of castings, did Chad and Lori talk to you about that at different times?
Yeah.
And if a casting was successful, a spirit would be cast out, is that right?
Yes.
And there were times another spirit may come in.
Yes.
That didn't mean the first casting wasn't successful, is that right?
Correct.
And if the casting was ultimately successful and the spirit's cast out and no other spirit comes in, what would happen to the body?
The body will finally die naturally.
Was Tammy deemed dark?
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It goes beyond the scope of cross-examination.
I'm gonna overrule that. I think that was brought up in direct.
Was Tammy Daybell deemed dark?
Yes, that she was deemed like she had been possessed, so she had become a zombie.
And is Tammy alive?
No.
Was Charles deemed dark?
Yes.
Is Charles alive?
No.
Was JJ deemed dark?
Yes.
Is JJ alive?
No.
Was Tylee deemed dark?
Yes.
And is Tylee alive?
No.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. All right, that'll conclude the testimony of this witness then. Ms. Pastenes, before you step down, let me inquire from the state, would this witness potentially be recalled?
The state would excuse Ms. Pastenes.
Mr. Pryor.
Judge, Ms. Pastenes is under subpoena from my office. I'd like to keep that subpoena in place.
Okay. Since you'll continue to be under subpoena then, Ms. Pastenes, the order of the court prohibits you from watching the trial until you're through testifying, so it is easily accessible. I would be asking you if you have watched it in any way, or observed it here or online where it's available to see. So refrain from doing that since you are still under subpoena. And with that, you may go ahead and step down, and thank you for your testimony.
Yeah.
He's
You're welcome.
holding on to that one. He's like, I'm going to hold on to this one. But he, prior looks like, well, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now?
All right, is the state ready to call another witness?
Yes, Your Honor, the state would call Garth Warren.
Very well.
Wait, who? At first I thought I heard them say Garth, but that would be Garth Daybell, and that would be called by the defense. So who? Did you all hear that? What that name was?
Be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you.
I heard Garth Warren too, but I don't know if that's. I guess we'll just need to listen.
All right. Witness has been sworn. Let me just inquire. I believe just to clarify, Mr. Wood, this is not an expert. Is this an expert witness that the exclusionary rule would not apply to?
I believe it would not apply.
I guess if you could advise. the
He
court,
is,
who
this is,
this witness?
Dr. Garth Warren is a medical examiner in the state of Idaho. He's a licensed pathologist.
Medical examiner.
Okay. I'll just inquire, I guess, and then make a determination if I need to. But have you been reviewing or watching any of the trial testimony in this case?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, well, with that in mind, then I'll just go ahead and allow for direct examination, Mr. Wood, without needing to determine whether that would apply in this case or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you, well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you state your name and spell it for the record?
Garth Warren, Garthwarren.
What is your occupation or profession?
I am a forensic
Warren.
pathologist for the Ada County Coroner's Office.
Mrs. M. That's
And as a
good.
forensic pathologist, are you a duly licensed physician in the state of Idaho?
Yes.
How long have you been licensed to practice your profession?
For 7 years in Idaho and before that, 5 years in Colorado.
And are you presently engaged in the practice of that same profession?
Yes.
Where did you receive your training in pathology?
So I did my general pathology training at Oregon Health and Sciences University in Portland, Oregon. And that was 3 years. And after I completed that, I stayed on for 2 years and completed a neuropathology fellowship, which is essentially just specialized training in the brain and spinal cord. And then I went to the Denver Office of the Medical Examiner in Denver, Colorado for my forensic pathology fellowship, which was 1 year.
And what are your duties as a medical examiner in Ada County, Idaho?
So working for the Ada County Coroner's Office, our office investigates a wide variety of deaths. And there's certain deaths that fall under our jurisdiction. Typically, those are non-natural deaths. So any suicides, accidents, homicides, and natural deaths as well. Not all natural deaths, but for instance, a young individual who passes away and there's not a good explanation of why they passed away. We'd investigate something like that. So those cases would come to our office. And my job is essentially to try to figure out why the person died. And the main tool that I use for that is the autopsy. We use other studies as well. But I use an autopsy to try to figure out why they died. And then ultimately, my job is to determine the cause and manner of death.
And you work at the Ada County Coroner's Office, correct?
That's correct.
To your knowledge, does Ada County have a contract with Fremont and Madison counties for you and other medical examiners to perform autopsy work?
Yes.
During your experience in the Ada County Coroner's Office, approximately how many autopsies have you performed?
So about 200 to 250 autopsies for 7 years. So over 1,500 autopsies.
So that's per year, that initial number you gave? Okay. Can you say yes, sorry, into the microphone? Or no?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Are you on staff or affiliated in any way with any universities or academic institutions?
Yes, the Idaho College of Medicine. We have medical students. I'm an adjunct professor there. We have medical students who come over and do rotations with us. And we show them what forensic pathology is like, and they rotate for about a month. And we have a number of those students who come and rotate at our office.
Are you a member of any specialized medical or scientific groups or associations?
Yes, I'm a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners and also the International Association of Coroners and Medical Examiners. They're both governing bodies for coroners and medical examiners throughout the country. And they do a wide variety of functions in education. They also accredit offices, basically give them a stamp of approval if they've met all the criteria set forth.
And the accreditation, is your office accredited?
Yes.
Can you briefly tell the jury what the American Board of Pathology is?
Yeah, so the American Board of Pathology is one of a number of different boards of in medicine. There's the American Board of Pathology, there's the American Board of Surgery, there's the American Board of Family Medicine, and so forth. So ultimately, their goal is to certify pathologists and give them a stamp of approval and say, now you're certified, now you can go out and you can practice as a pathologist. How they do that is after you complete your training. So for instance, after I completed my general pathology training at Oregon, I had to go take a day-long test, and then you have to pass that test. And then after that, the board will say you're board certified, and then you can go practice. And the same thing with neuropathology and forensic pathology, the same thing happened.
And are you certified in pathology?
Yes.
And you've mentioned forensic pathology. Can you define that term or describe what that means for the jury?
So it's really the practice of medicine, specifically forensic pathology, and performing autopsies in the context of the legal system. So I often go to court and testify, not on every case, but on many cases. So it's really, it's the combination of we're applying medicine and forensic pathology to the legal system.
Are you the author of any textbooks or any specific papers in the field of pathology?
I published papers when I was a neuropathology fellow. Yes.
Can you explain for the jury what the difference is between a manner of death and cause of death?
Yes. So the cause of death is the natural event or the traumatic injury that ultimately sets into motion a series of events that causes somebody to die. So for instance, a heart attack, that would be a cause of death, or a gunshot wound to the head would be a cause of death. Manner of death is a little different. It deals with more of the circumstances surrounding the death. In most states, you have 5 options. You have natural, accident, suicide, homicide, and then undetermined. And based on the circumstances, you essentially pick one of those. An example I always give is a gunshot wound to the head. A gunshot wound to the head could be self-inflicted. It could be by somebody else, a homicide. It could be an accident. So in order to determine whether it's one of those, you really have to know the circumstances of death. You know, have to know the scene, And you can't just base it on the autopsy because it could look exactly the same.
And can you tell the jury what an unattended death is?
So an unattended death is essentially a death that's unattended, or that's not attended by a physician. So if you pass away in the hospital and there is a physician present, that would be an attended death. If you pass away at your home, or if somebody passes away in a public park, that would be considered an unattended death.
Is there a general procedure you follow when performing an autopsy?
Yes.
During your years of experience as a medical examiner or a forensic pathologist, have you had occasion to observe many cases in which the cause of death was homicide or linked to a homicide?
Yes.
Doctor, were you involved in the autopsy of JJ or Joshua Jackson Vallow?
Yes.
When was that?
That was on June 11th, 2020,
And where did that autopsy take place?
at the Ada County Coroner's Office.
Was this the first time you had ever seen JJ Vallow?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how long that autopsy lasted?
It lasted approximately 4 hours.
And did you write a report summarizing your findings for that autopsy?
Yes.
Based on that autopsy and based on your education, training, and experience, have you formed an opinion concerning the cause of death of JJ Vallow?
Yes, I have.
What was that cause of death?
Asphyxia by plastic bag over the head and duct tape covering the mouth.
Can you explain for the jury how that autopsy commenced? What were the first steps?
So as we mentioned, the first time that I saw JJ was in the morgue at the Ada County Coroner's Office. I went into the morgue and JJ was received in a sealed black body bag. It was sealed to preserve evidence by law enforcement. So that was the first time that I'd seen JJ, and we broke the seal at that time, and we opened up the sealed black body bag. And within the body bag, JJ was further enclosed within a black tarp that was held together with multiple strips of duct tape. So we opened that bag, and that was really the first time I got a good look at JJ.
And what did you observe when you were able to see him?
So a couple things jumped out that were pretty obvious. One was there was a plastic bag that was over JJ's head, and it was wrapped around the face with duct tape all the way down to the neck. The forearms and the hands were also they were bound with duct tape. The ankles were bound with duct tape. And JJ was clothed in a red pajama top, red pajama bottom, disposable diaper, and black socks. And then you could also tell, even when he was clothed, really the only part of his skin that was showing at that point were his upper arms. And you could tell he was in a state of decomposition. It didn't look like normal skin. It was green and kind of had a green and tan leathery appearance to it. So I could tell that JJ was in a state of decomposition.
Were photographs taken of this autopsy?
Yes.
Once you were able to observe JJ, what did you do next?
So after we photographed that, we undressed JJ. We took the pajama bottoms and tops off. We took the socks off, and we submitted those to law enforcement. We removed the plastic bag and the duct tape around the head and the neck, and we submitted that to law enforcement. We removed the duct tape that bound his arms and his legs, and we submitted that to law enforcement. And at that point in time, JJ was nude on the table, and we collected other evidence at that point in time. So in addition to everything that was on JJ, we also took hand swabs from both hands, nail swabs. The nails actually came off fairly easily because of the state of decomposition. So we ended up submitting all the nails as evidence as well. We also took oral swabs, anal swabs, and penile swabs at that time.
And were those swabs a part of an external examination?
Yes, at that point in time, we had still not started the internal portion of the autopsy.
And did you do anything else as part of the external examination?
Yes. So the autopsy really consists of an internal examination and an external examination. We start with the external examination, and I describe everything on JJ from his hair color to his eye color, his ears, his teeth, the fingernails, all the way down to his feet. And I'm just looking for any signs of natural disease or any kind of trauma that would help me explain why JJ passed away.
Did you see any external signs of disease?
I did not.
Did you see any external signs of trauma?
I did.
Can you describe those for the jury?
So one of the things that jumped out was there were scratch-like abrasions on the left side of JJ's neck. In addition to that, there was bruising on JJ's right and left upper arm, and a symmetrical bruising. And then in addition, there was diffuse hemorrhage under one of JJ's fingernails, his right thumb. There's diffuse hemorrhage under his thumbnail.
And I'm going to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Can you define that type of hemorrhage?
It's called a subungual hemorrhage.
And what does that mean?
I mean, there's been force or trauma to the finger. Just like I don't know if you've ever, for instance, slammed your finger in the door. You get that diffuse hemorrhage underneath your fingernail. That would be a subungual hemorrhage.
And did you observe?
Could I have him spell that term of what's after sub on the hemorrhage?
Please, let me give this a shot. SUBUNGUAL.
Thank you.
And did you observe any other signs of possible trauma on JJ's external body?
The only other thing I found, there was what appeared to be possible bruise on his ankles, just to the naked eye after we removed the duct tape. It looked like possible bruising. You do have to be careful when the body's in a state of decomposition, because sometimes decomposition can look like bruising. So there were some things that we did to rule out that, both in the arms and the ankles.
And what is it that you did to examine that or rule that out?
So what you do in that case is you make incisions into the skin and you look for hemorrhage in the subcutaneous tissue. The general rule of thumb is if it's true and it's real, you'll see actual hemorrhage in the subcutaneous tissue. If it's most likely decomposition, then you won't see that hemorrhage. So when we did that on the arms, both of the arms showed bleeding in the subcutaneous tissue. So to me, that meant they were real bruises. There was no definitive hemorrhage in the areas that I thought to be possible hemorrhage in the ankles. So although it looked like bruising, I can't say that it was.
But on the arms, what was your conclusion on his arms?
That it was bruising.
Did you perform an internal examination as part of your autopsy?
I did.
You Can you just briefly kind of explain that process for the jury?
Yes, so we do make incisions in the body to look at to get access to the brain, and also to look at the heart and the lungs and the liver and all the different organs. In this case, JJ's organs were remarkably intact, considering how long he was probably deceased. They did have decomposition, but they were very well intact, well formed. So I was able to evaluate each organ. Essentially what I found was there was decomposition changes, but there was no evidence of overt trauma or overt natural disease, either just looking at it or under the microscope, looking at tissues under the microscope.
And just to be clear, you said you saw no signs of natural disease.
Correct.
Did you check for rib fractures?
I did. In this case, what you can do to get even a better look for rib fractures, you can peel a thin layer called the pleura that lines the ribs, and you can get a really good look at the ribs. I saw no rib fractures. And in addition, we did do full body x-rays on JJ. I think we took 6 x-rays looking for fractures. And I did not see any overt fractures or bony abnormalities on x-ray either.
Were you able to observe his lungs?
Yes.
What did you observe there?
His lungs essentially showed decomposition changes, like I stated, but there was no evidence of natural disease, either grossly looking at them. And I also took sections of the lungs and looked at them under the microscope, and I did not see any obvious natural disease under the microscope as well.
Did you gather any samples for testing from JJ's body?
Yes.
What were those? Do you recall?
Yes. So typically in an autopsy, we try to get blood, urine, and vitreous fluid. So vitreous fluid is fluid in the eyeball. We can do a number of different tests on those samples. In this particular case, because of the state of decomposition, we were unable to get blood, urine, or vitreous fluid. So what you do in that case is you can use a sample from a different organ, a liver. The liver is a good sample to get for toxicology. So we obtained liver to send out for toxicology, and then we also obtained a portion of a rib. We also obtained 2 molars. We obtained hair samples for potential DNA analysis that might be needed later on.
And did you stated that you sent some of those samples off for testing?
Correct.
Do you recall what the results was?
Yes. So the liver sample we sent for toxicology, and it came back positive for ethanol or alcohol, low levels of ethanol. It came back for a what's called GHB or gamma hydroxybutyric acid. It also came back positive for caffeine, and it came back positive for theobromine.
And did any of those elements or those the amounts of those substances cause you any concern?
So the caffeine is caffeine. We all know what caffeine is. Yeah, that's very common. We get that. That didn't bother me. The theobromine, that's essentially, that can be found in tea and cocoa products. So that did not concern me as well. The ethanol, that very well could have been a byproduct of decomposition. That's very common. We see that a lot. So I can't completely rule out that JJ wasn't exposed to alcohol when he was alive, but it's very possible that it was just postmortem production from the decomposition process. And then the GHB, so what GHB is, it's essentially, it's a CNS or central nervous system depressant. It can be found, or it is found naturally in the body. So it's found predominantly in the brain and the spinal cord, and it can be also found in peripheral tissues. But it is also a drug that's used for both medicinal and recreational purposes as well. So for medicinal purposes, sometimes it's used for narcolepsy. For recreational purposes, it's often called liquid ecstasy. Sometimes it's referred to as a date rape drug. But in addition, so it has CNS depressants. It also can cause euphoria, increased libido, and it can also cause amnesia or memory loss while the drug is on board. So that was a concern when I saw that. But the level that it was at, I can't tell if he was exposed to it or if it was produced post-mortem. It very well could have been produced post-mortem, but I also can't rule out that it was ingested.
Your Honor, I'll just note, looking at the time, this is normally when I would introduce some pictures. I don't think we're going to really have time to get into that. If it's all right with the court, I'm going to move forward with a little bit of other questioning and then pick up in the morning.
Okay, let's do that because we'll likely need to rearrange the gallery as well for that. So thank you, Mr. Wood. You may continue.
Doctor, were you involved in the autopsy of Tylee Ryan?
Yes,
When was that?
that was on the same day as JJ's autopsy. So that was June 11th, 2020.
And where did that take place?
That was also at the Ada County Coroner's Office.
Was this the first time you had ever seen Tylee Ryan?
Yes,
How long did that autopsy last?
that autopsy took longer. It took about a week.
And why was that?
Tylee's autopsy was different. Typically, when I do an autopsy, I get an intact body, and I go through the same procedures that I did with JJ. And then in Tylee's case, her body was received in multiple bags. It was received in two of the bags were body bags, sealed body bags. A third bag was a brown paper bag, and it contained 5 additional paper bags within that were sealed. And within all of those bags were human remains, a combination of bones, tissue, organs, and then also quite a bit of mud and dirt and other debris. So you can imagine with that many bags going through, cleaning them, trying to figure out what is what, it took a long time.
Did you write a report summarizing your findings for that autopsy?
I did.
Based on that autopsy and upon your education, training, and experience, have you formed an opinion concerning the cause of death of Tylee Ryan?
I have.
What is that?
I determined the cause of death to be homicide by unspecified means.
And when you say homicide by unspecified means, is that a specific categorization?
It is. So essentially what it means is after reviewing all the information and performing the autopsy and doing toxicology and so forth, that I believe that Tylee, that she was murdered. I think it was a homicide. But because of the state of the body, I just can't say exactly how. So this term homicide by unspecified means, it's well known in the forensic literature. It's been used by forensic pathologists for years. And there's certain guidelines and criteria in the forensic literature that are out there to kind of help guide you when you're thinking about using this as a term. So those criteria are: one, it has to be objectively suspicious circumstances. And there are a number of examples they give for that. So the one is that the body is clearly out of sight and has been put in a way that's try to hide the body. Another one is that the evidence has been someone's tried to conceal the evidence. So that would be something like burning the body or dismembering the body or dumping bleach on the body. So in this case, Tylee was dismembered, and she was also set on fire. So that clearly fit within that criteria. The second criteria is based on the autopsy, you can't determine an obvious cause of death. And there's two parts to that. One, if you have an intact body, you do the full autopsy and there's no other reason why this individual should be dead. You can't find anything. The second would be there's not enough of the body to make a determination. So Tylee fit within that second category in that. The third criteria is toxicology. Is there any evidence that toxicology played a role in the decedent's death? In this particular case, there was not that I could find. And then the fourth criteria is that based on historical and social information, is there a good explanation why she could have been dead? And based on the medical records and the information that I had, I didn't think there was a reasonable explanation for Tylee to be dead. So based on that, I called it homicide by unspecified means.
And you mentioned you did review her medical records.
I did.
Did she have any, do you recall what her medical history was?
Yes, I do. So she had a history of anxiety and she had panic attacks. She also had a history of ovarian cysts. They were benign, but they would sometimes cause her discomfort. She also had a history of pancreatitis. She had multiple bouts of pancreatitis, is inflammation of the pancreas. There's multiple reasons why you can have pancreatitis. In adults, it's usually alcohol or gallstones that causes pancreatitis. In children and adolescents, you get a little broader differential. It could be a wide variety of things. It could be the anatomy is a little different, and that causes inflammation. It could be a number of different prescription medications. So based on her medical records, they didn't know exactly why she was getting them. There was mention that every time she took an antibiotic, which is one of the drugs that can cause pancreatitis, that she would tend to get pancreatitis. So that may have played a role. And then the other thing that she had was, it's called mesenteric adenitis. So that's essentially, you have lymph nodes in your abdomen in the adipose tissue. So if you get a virus or those can become inflamed and they can cause pain. And they can cause pain that's similar to like your appendix. So I believe that is it for what I remember from her medical records.
And did anything in that medical history, were any of those things you just described problematic enough to explain her death?
No, not in my opinion.
Your Honor, I note the time. And the state is certainly willing and able to keep going, but leave that to the deference of the court. on
Okay.
Scheduling.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wood. We're going to go ahead and conclude for the day. I'll note tomorrow when we come back on, I anticipate you're going to have photos that we won't be broadcasting. Is that correct, Mr. Wood?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll set the gallery up to accommodate that tomorrow. We will go ahead and adjourn for the day. Thank you for complying with courtroom conduct order. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the juror, for your attentiveness today. Please follow the court's admonishment as you break for the day to not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Please don't do anything to research the case, look the case up in any way, or follow the case in any media. We'll have you fill out your juror affirmation when you return tomorrow. We'll continue with the direct examination of Dr. Warren tomorrow morning at 8:30, and that will be it for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, wait.
All right, so I'm just muting it for the moment just in case they come back. Well, maybe not. Looks like they're not going to come back, so I'm going to remove this. So that was a very, very, very interesting day of testimony. Most of the day taken up by Zulema Pastenis. Prior, even misstating her name in front of her, Zaluma. I think he calls her Zaluma. So she corrected him on stand. But I think after that testimony from Zulema, we've talked about, all right, is the state going to be able to show more of a connection between Chad, Daybell, and these murders? Because so far it's Lori, and there's also, all these implications about Melanie Gibb, and there's so many other players, and I'm sure that the jury is uber confused about all these names. But after a day of testimony like this, and a day of and other days of testimony, the state, I feel, is honing in closer and closer and closer on Chad. And today was pretty important in that regard, because Zulema pretty clearly stated that Chad was directing these things. And then you even hear, in some of the testimony, that he's leading some of these discussions. And, I think it's pretty well known that in the LDS church, at least in their culture, most of the time the men and the women are separated. Like, like men go do their thing, women go do their thing, and then they come together for certain purposes, but the men are always seen to be the ones in charge. So I don't think it's a stretch for the jury to understand that in this group, the women were, doing these things like having a 7 gatherers Gmail chat group. And, Chad, the man, was, leading them. It's not that difficult to understand. And, Prior, really trying hard, was trying to impeach this witness by saying, bringing in evidence from previous police interviews about how the, Detective Hermosillo and Zulema had a conversation about her credibility and, differences in some of the dates that she's saying. And, he really failed on all those counts, because most of the time the things that he was picking on are not really material to the situation. But also what Hermosillo was saying in that video is the defense is likely to come back and try to blame other people. He was foreseeing exactly what's happening, right? He's going to try to come back and blame other people. And I don't want it to come back on you, right? Because you're clearly not involved. That, I'm paraphrasing that, but that's basically what was being done. So 2 different times when Pryor is questioning Zulema on the stand, she basically says he was trying to prevent what you're doing now. He was getting ahead of what you're doing right now. So I kind of wish that she would have expounded on that a little bit more and said he was trying to prevent the defense from trying to blame other people for Chad's actions, but Chad's and Lori's actions. But I think she got her point across. It was probably pretty effective. I don't understand why they all thought Chad was sexy. It's ridiculous. It's like when people think that somebody is a prophet, all of a sudden the most unsexy man like Charles Manson becomes sexy, right? It's freaking insane. It's freaking insane. The medical examiner's testimony was heartbreaking, but also confirmed things. I didn't know that there was GHB in JJ's system. And the medical examiner said that GHB naturally occurs in the human body. But the thing is that he couldn't rule out that maybe it was introduced to him. And so it's possible that they low dosed JJ just to get him to sleep, right? Because that's really what it's used for. It's a multi-use drug, GHB. It gets people, it's a sedative. It causes people to forget what's happening when the drug is on board. It makes them, malleable. And so really all they needed for JJ to do was to sleep. And the last sighting of JJ alive, aside from his killer, was when David Warwick and Melanie Gibbs saw him being carried out by Alex, and he was asleep on Alex's shoulders. And I've always felt that they probably gave him something to conk out like that. Right? And then Lori was also saying to David Warwick the next day that he was climbing up on the cabinets and he knocked down Lori's picture of Christ and things like that. So they were using that kind of a story to justify Alex taking him away, but probably also to justify giving him whatever it was that they gave him to conk him out. Chopper, they were saying, the medical examiner was saying that GHB is liquid X. So it's not the exact same thing, but it has the same effect. It has the same effect. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that either, Patricia. That was a new thing, and I'm sorry you got GHB, Stacy. I think a lot of people. I'm starting to hear more and more about that happening to people, and I've started to wonder if it ever happened to me. I think if it did happen to me, I would have known. But it's been such a long time since I was part of that culture that it would be impossible for me to remember. But yes, if you've ever heard the term date R drug, date RAPE drug, that's GHB. That is GHB. Because it conks people out and it gives people, it deprives people of their memories of what happened. From my knowledge and understanding, ecstasy doesn't take away your memory. You can still remember things when you're on ecstasy, and it doesn't cause you to fall asleep. Ecstasy actually usually has some sort of stimulant effects in it that keeps you up. So I don't think they're not when you say liquid when the examiner says liquid ecstasy, he doesn't specifically mean it's the same exact thing, just in liquid form. It's just what they call it, right? But it's liquid because that's how they yeah, it is a common recreational drug, not just on the gay scene, but just on the party scene. Just on the party scene. So anyway, that will do it for our coverage today. As always, as the days progress in a trial, they get more and more interesting. and they're getting more and more interesting here, and they are definitely closing in on Chad, and he's looking more and more depleted over there in his at his defense table, sinking down a little bit more. Sometimes he's, while he was watching Pryor cross-examine Zulema, I think he really felt like there was a chance there that Zulema might get impeached, but it just didn't take. I don't think any of that impeachment attempt was successful. I don't know if you can hear it right now, but my poor dog Steve is so very needy right now that I should probably end this stream. He's like, hello, hello. He keeps nudging my face and my hands. So anyway, lay down, Steve. Lay down. Lay down. Anyway, so yeah, I'm curious about what they think of each other at this point, Patricia. I'm super curious about that. So, and there may be ways we can find out. We'll check it out. So I will see you. I will reschedule this to start up again tomorrow. I'll start probably like a half hour after court starts, so we have a way to fast forward. And in the meantime, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being so lovely. I hope that if you're not feeling well, that you feel better. I hope that if you are feeling well, that you feel even better than you feel now. And I hope to see you tomorrow. And please remember to hit the thumbs up on the way out if you didn't remember doing it on the way in. Thank you very much. Bye.